You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today, we finally begin our transition back to, well, I suppose one might call it reality, but frankly, that's rather a silly concept for what it is, considering what passes for reality these days. We do so with a nonfiction segment in Fighting Words, and then a decidedly nonfiction segment coming right up inside the headlines. Spring is springing, and nature seems to be waking up on this side of the planet. But before we celebrate the natural world, we need to go inside the headlines. I'm indebted to a piece by Rachel Kleinfeld in Persuasion, the online community magazine, for insights in this story. Recently, a widely circulated analysis in the Financial Times confirmed what many researchers had long suspected. The ideological gap between men and women is growing. Over the past 15 years, men across the globe have voted for radical right-wing parties at much higher rates. Spain's far-right populist and conspiracy-minded Vox party polls roughly twice as well among men compared with women. While men and women voted for Poland's anti-democratic Law and Justice Party at similar rates last year, men voted for the even more extreme Konfederacja nearly 3 times as much as women. Data from a 2009 study of European parties that leaned authoritarian or populist found that men were generally around twice as likely as women to vote for them, and up to 5 times more likely in the case of the nationalist, populist Swedish Democrats. It isn't just Europe. Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro performed 10 points better among men than women in the 2018 election that brought him to power. Roughly the same gender difference pushed Argentina's new populist libertarian leader, Javier Milei, over the top last November. In some countries, gender aligns closely with other social and demographic barriers, but in a number of places, being male makes a big difference. The United States is no exception. As women moved strongly to the left, men have moved to the right, creating a gap between male and female voting that was greater for Trump in 2016 than in a half-century of exit polling. While much has been written on the role of race in recent elections, gender is playing a crucial and different role. White men formed Trump's core support in 2016, but by 2020, Trump polled 12 points better with black men than black women, winning 18% of the black male vote. The problem isn't that men are natural crusaders for authoritarian populists, I think. In fact, American men, are much more likely to be politically apathetic, and most young men are better characterized as confused or drifting. The problem is that anti-democratic and violent forces are trying to weaponize that aimlessness. Politics is coming into most men's lives subtly. They look for belonging, purpose, and advice, and find a mix of grifters, political hacks, and violent extremists who lead them down an ugly road. Popular culture focuses on Elon Musk, Davos CEOs in Davos, and other men flourishing at the top of society's heap, the powerful. But that's not where the majority of men exist. Men with only a high school diploma typically earn $1,017 a week in today's dollars. In 1979, that was what they earned. Now they earn $881 a week. More than 1 in 10 in their prime aren't working at all. It's not just about money, but about status and life satisfaction. Women are out-graduating men from high school and vastly out-competing them in college. These women aren't so interested in men who are less educated and earn poorly. So men without college degrees are marrying less. Over 1.5 million men aged 20 to 24 are not in school, training, or work. And these men are having a lot less sex than past generations and their more productive peers. Unsurprisingly, young men without college degrees report that they have the least optimism and purpose in life among all the groups of men surveyed. Many have lost a reliable way to earn a living. They also claim to have at least the least social support and are uncertain how to have basic relationships with friends, let alone romantic partners. They feel their low status keenly, and because popular culture aggregates their lives with the men at the nosebleed top, they are told by much of the left that they are privileged and should take a back seat. Many men turn these feelings inward, with the result that nearly 3 in every 4 deaths of despair, largely from opioids and suicide, are male. That nearly 3 in every 4 deaths are literally male and suicides. These deaths become so common that they were causing a decline in life expectancy for American men even prior to COVID-19, which is a tragedy for these individuals and their families and their communities, but some men seek someone else to blame, and that has become a tragedy. For the 2/3 of young men who are willing to admit to researchers that no one, absolutely no one, really knows me well, a sense of community might mean a lot. It might mean even more to men who report having no social activities at all, as 1 in 6 of all men with a high school education or less claim. That leaves a lot of time for web surfacing and gaming. And that's where Steve Bannon found them. Bannon told journalist Joshua Green that he first noticed the monster power, as he put it, of these rootless white males when he bought a gaming company long before he entered politics. In 2012, when he took over the Breitbart News Network, he hired the provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos to, quote, activate that army. Yiannopoulos declared that feminist bullies were tearing the video game industry apart and poured fuel on what became the Gamergate controversy, which catalyzed a harassment campaign against women game developers. As Bannon explained, they come in through Gamergate or wherever and then get turned onto politics and Trump. Men do. Bannon was hardly alone in noticing a pool of possible recruits. Gavin McInnes, the founder of the violent Proud Boys movement of male supremacists, focused more than half the videos that launched his movement on male victimhood. Feminism, he claimed, isn't about equality anymore. It's about taking masculinity away from men. He offered violence as a way for men who felt their manhood had been threatened to demonstrate strength and virility. Like martial artists, men can move through 4 degrees to gain status in Proud Boys' hierarchy, first by submitting to violence by other members of the group, for example, getting punched in the stomach until you can name 5 breakfast cereals, ostensibly to demonstrate adrenaline control, and in the end carrying out political violence against others in American society. McInnes follows a long tradition. Globally, violent extremists often look to give men who feel disenfranchised or emasculated in other parts of their lives a way to feel powerful. White supremacists have been recruiting young men on gaming platforms for years, and they're getting more prevalent. The frequency of exposure more than doubled after 2021, with nearly 1 in 5 people on gaming platforms reporting that they had seen white supremacist content in 2022. But more and more often, men are being recruited into extremist politics and violence, not only far-right ideology or racism, but simply by trying to figure out how to be a man in a world where gender roles have changed precipitously. Go online and start looking for typical questions that a man might ask in the absence of any friends or role models, like how to find a date or how to build muscle. Before long, the algorithms pull these guys into a manosphere, a world of online men support communities that begins with many appealing on-ramps for someone trying to figure out how to live, but ends in a swamp of men endorsing hate, misogyny, and violence. Nearly half of the young men aged 18 to 25 told Equimundo Research that they trust one or more of the men's rights, anti-feminist, or pro-violence manosphere influencers such as Andrew Tate, a MAGA supporter and self-described misogynist. The manosphere takes very real problems that men face and blames them on women. Now, this is a very important piece, but I have to ask this of it. Has anyone ever asked this question in terms of race? In other words, listen to this sentence. Americans spent decades building a path for empowered women and girls without any accompanying effort to craft a broader and more secure sense of masculinity for the men who needed to stand beside them. Now we are reaping the backlash. Well, one might ask, why is that the job of women and girls? Why is that the job of black people? If you read it, Americans spent decades building a path for empowered people of color, without any accompanying effort to craft a broader and more secure sense of participation for the white people who needed to stand alongside them. Now they're reaping the backlash. We would think that was a racist statement. So I think that this is conceivably a bit suspicious. When we blame the victim, it always makes me nervous. However, there is a historical precedent for this, not very recent in the past. Benito Mussolini secured Italy's premiership by marching on Rome with 30,000 black shirts in 1922. This, by the way, is from the Smithsonian Magazine in its historical section. By 1925, he declared himself a leader for life. And while this hardly reflected American values, Mussolini was a darling of the American press, appearing in at least 150 articles from 1925 to 1932, most of them neutral, and many of them bemused or positive in tone. The Saturday Evening Post serialized Il Duce's autobiography in 1928, acknowledging that the new fascisti movement was a bit rough in its methods. That's a direct quote. The Saturday Evening Post papers and other papers, ranging from the New York Tribune to the Cleveland Plain Dealer to the Chicago Tribune, credited Il Duce with saving Italy from the far left and revitalizing its economy. From their perspective, the post-World War I surge of anti-capitalism in Europe was vastly a worse threat than fascism. Ironically, while the media acknowledged that fascism was a new experiment, papers like the New York Times commonly credited it with returning turbulent Italy to what it called normalcy. Some journalists, including Hemingway and magazines like The New Yorker, rejected the normalization of anti-democratic Mussolini, but not many. His success in Italy was soon to be imitated. When Hitler's party won influence in Parliament, and even after he was made Chancellor of Germany in 1933, about a year and a half after seizing dictatorial power, many American press outlets judged that he would either be outplayed by more traditional politicians or that he would have to become more moderate. Does this sound familiar? Sure, he had a following, but his followers were impressionable voters, close quote, duped by, quote, radical doctrines and quack remedies. That was the Washington Post claimed that. Now that Hitler actually had to operate within a government, the sober politicians, that is, the grown-ups, remember them, would submerge this movement, according to the New York Times and the Christian Science Monitor. A keen sense of dramatic instinct was not enough when it came time to govern. His lack of gravity and profundity of thought would be exposed. And the New York Times wrote after Hitler's appointment to the chancellorship that success would only let him expose to the German public his own futility. The American press continued to condemn Hitler's well-documented anti-Semitism in the early 1930s, however. But there were plenty of exceptions. Some papers downplayed reports of violence against Germany's Jewish citizens as propaganda, and many, including those who categorically condemned the violence, repeatedly declared it would soon be at an end, showing a tendency to return to that much vaunted normalcy. German journalists were aware that they could only criticize the German regime so much and maintain their access. When a CBS broadcaster's son was beaten up by brown shirts for not saluting the Führer, he did not report it. When the Chicago Daily News' Edgar Moeller wrote that Germany was becoming an insane asylum in 1933, the Germans pressured the State Department to rein in American reporters. And Allen Dulles, who eventually became director of the CIA, told Maurer that he was, quote, taking the German situation far too seriously, close quote. Maurer's publisher then transferred him out of Germany in fear of his life. By the later 1930s, most U.S. journalists realized their mistake in underestimating Hitler and Mussolini, or failing to imagine just how bad things could turn out to be. Well, that was a rather bracing plunge into reality. So we have to take a break here, but we will return in just a moment, so don't go anywhere. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Vivid, accurate, unflinching descriptions of nature and the natural world, those can be fighting words. These words are nonfiction, and they are listed as the author's note in Parallax, my recent novel by Spinifex Press. But these are not, as I said, fiction. And I think of it less as an author's note and more as, well, I title it in my mind and heart, simply, The Monarch. This is a true story. One citizen of the universe is a small creature who, as a matter of course, transforms itself through 4 distinct lives within 4 distinct existences. The monarch is sometimes called the milkweed butterfly, since the underside of milkweed leaves is the only food its larva can eat. Monarchs and related species are found wherever milkweed's own plant relatives, sometimes called blood flowers, grow, on every continent except the polar regions. The plant protects its butterfly. Milk in quotes, milk ingested by a larva renders the monarch poisonous to birds of prey. In the intricate balance requiring fairness to predators, however, the flicker of black-banded tangerine monarch wings signals that this prey may be toxic. Then again, a sly counter to simplistic assumptions. Not all monarchs are poisonous, since not all milkweeds produce poisonous, noxious juices. Yet a butterfly's warning still performs a witty camouflage for poisonous and non-poisonous monarchs alike, arming both against birds of prey. And because life imitates not only art but itself, the innocently non-toxic viceroy butterfly mimics the colors and patterns of the monarch, sending the same alert, gaining the same protection. The wings of both butterflies, all butterflies in fact, collect energy from sunlight to stay warm. They reap the light. The monarch, apparently unsatiated by these gaudy carnival masks of color, reinvents itself ceaselessly, shifting through 4 discrete lives in a single existence and paying the price exacted by such metamorphoses, with repeated death throes and relentless resurrections. The minuscule legs laid on the underside of milkweed leaves take 3 to 5 days to hatch into tiny larvae, who begin sucking at the leaves. Over the next 2 weeks, each larva elongates into a black striped worm, the color of young limes, capable of spinning threads from itself. It weaves these into a sheath, then wreathes its body inside this chrysalis, the cocoon where it dangles for another lifetime, 10 days. Finally, with the violence characteristic of any organism writhing free from old forms, what had been a caterpillar emerges, wet, matted, unrecognizable, until wings shudder open and spread, harvesting light, drying into perfect miniature stained glass windows, the hues of sunrise and midnight, an adult monarch. Then it steps onto air and flies. Whether it remembers or cares who it was before flight is a matter of speculation, but only among humans. This last lifetime aloft can be as short as 14 or as long as 40 days, during which time it might mate, might lay eggs. Then it dies. Well, not quite. These quatrefoil lives on a single stem parallel 4 existences in one discrete life, 4 generations in a single year, which the monarch requires for survival. The first generation, born in late winter, perishes after having laid eggs for the next. The second generation, born in late spring, does the same. So does the third, born in midsummer. All 3 develop, creep, suck, grow, spin, weave, wrap, dangle, writhe, shudder, spread, fly, mate, spawn, and die. All 3 follow the same quartile cycle: larva, caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly. But the 4th generation is different. The 4th generation, born in autumn, does not die after 14 days or even 40. The 4th generation migrates. It flies for 3 months, over oceans, through storms, lightning, snows, predators, beating wings filmy as petals, almost 3,000 miles. No other insect can fly such a distance. Once the monarchs recognize as home the roosting place where they have never been, they land. The fourth generation rests in this warmth for as long as 8 months, hibernating in clusters, each monarch slowing its heart rate until internal time turns on the annual axis of light. Then up to 2/3 of this generation emerges, twice born, to mate, lay eggs, and then die. From those eggs, life stage 1 of the first generation begins. The last third of the old generation, re-emerging, twice born, it starts the journey back. Great glowing blizzards of wings, swarming and mating in the hundreds of thousands, resting along the way in stages, spawning, dying. A new generation then takes to the air for as long as 3 months, across oceans, through heat, rain, winds, predators, beating and beating wings, filmy as petals, almost 3,000 miles. Once the monarchs recognize as home the place where they have never been, they land. There it begins again. Whether at any point the monarch views its current stage as a position or a direction, as a whole or as the part of the whole, is not known. They may also differ when viewed from the different perspectives themselves, a parallax. There are theories about why the monarch migrates, but no one knows for sure. There are studies of the migratory patterns, but the routes change. The migration takes up to 3 generations to complete. Only one thing is known for certain. No one butterfly ever makes the round trip. That was The Monarch from Parallax, my recent book from Spinifex Press. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burden. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.